you so much for joining us this morning for this webinar, Shifting from Spreadsheets to a Proactive, Data-Driven Assessment in Student Advising with Analytics. It is January 30th, and I am here with Dr. Yolanda Hardy from Palm Beach Atlantic Lloyd L. Gregory School of Pharmacy. Everybody, you are muted right now, so whatever you say at the screen won't come through to us. Please use, if you'd like something to come through to us, please use the Zoom webinar Q&A to ask questions or send us feedback at any time. This recording will be available afterwards, so if anybody misses it or you have to leave early for any reason, don't worry, it will show up in your email inbox, usually within 12 to 24 hours after it has time to process and make sure that everything came out okay. So right now, we just want to learn a little bit more about you, what institution you represent, if you can put that in the chat for us, and then what are your biggest challenges with student advising? Go ahead and throw that in the chat for us as we get started here. So again, host today, myself and Dr. Yolanda M. Hardy, PharmD, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs, Assessment and Accreditation, and an Associate Professor in Pharmacy Practice at Palm Beach Atlantic University, Lloyd L. Gregory School of Pharmacy in Florida. How are you doing today, Yolanda?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah, I'm sure the weather is fantastic down there, or at least more fantastic than it is up here in northeastern Pennsylvania, where there is still snow on the ground. I'm sure you don't have any of that.
We have no snow, but we have a cold advisory, so it was in the 50s this morning.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I'm sure some of you were like freezing, but then there's some of us that are like, I would love to have the 50s in the end of January right now.
Yes.
So Yolanda, if you just want to give us a little bit of background about you, how long you've been in pharmacy ed, things like that.
Yes, so I have been in pharmacy education for about 20 years. My practice, I'm a practicing pharmacist, of course, and was working in ambulatory care, but just found academia was more appealing to me. And I've kind of moved up the ranks. I was a department chair for a while at Chicago State University. And here at Palm Beach Atlantic, started out as the Assistant Dean of Assessment, and then have moved up to earn some more letters
Yeah.
behind that assistant, and became the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs, Assessment, and Accreditation at this point, and I'm enjoying every moment of it.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. And I see we're joined by a lot of our colleagues from across the country. It's great to see people from Texas and University of Michigan, and even out here in Pennsylvania, Ohio area with some of our friends from LECOM. So super exciting to see you all here today as Yolanda shares with us her best practices in using NFLUX and in helping students to succeed. And if you don't know me, my name is Megan Milchark. I'm the head of education and assessment here for NFLUX. That means I am in charge of customer success. I am also a subject matter expert in assessment, came up through pharmacy, have spent some time acting as the director of assessment in different schools of pharmacy, as well as working in liberal arts education and assessment as well. So you guys are my people. I love being amongst my pharmacy people. All of my clients are great, but there's just a common language and a feel of chatting with my pharmacy folks that I miss from being in academia. So it's always a great time. And talking with Yolanda is always a time where I am finding a lot more just information and insight just into what she has found throughout her practice and throughout her years. So today we're really going to dive into some of the things that she has utilized and discovered as practices for herself and her students. Making sure, of course, that we're couching it in the use of educational technology because we are here, the future is now, we are using tech. So as we started to think about this and conceive about this, Yolanda, we know that we have to do these things, right? Standards 24 and 25 of the pharmacy, the ACPE accreditation docs are pretty clear to us that we need to be assessing our students on their knowledge and performance-based assessments, making sure that they're getting that practice-ready education so that when they graduate, they're ready to practice at the top of their license. They don't need as much time. We're looking at a student achievement of competencies and improving student learning. So all of these are sort of outcomes that we're looking at, but there's a real reason behind it, Yolanda, and that's really serving our students, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, and making sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. But yeah, it's serving our students and making sure that we're confident and that they are confident that they are capable and able to practice as pharmacists and provide care for the patients that we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we put together all these assessments. That's the point of doing all of this data analysis. And really, the way that we can address this in a faster way is through our data analytics, right? We don't want to go with our gut feelings. Do we think we're giving knowledge and performance based assessments? No, we want to show that we are doing that. It should be easy to show if we are designing things simply. But as we know, there's a lot of different available ed techs out there, ed tech companies for LMS, for SIS systems. Schools are changing all the time. They're looking at online testing platforms, in-class assessment platforms. So the data is all there, right? It's available. It's just a matter of, can we get it and can we use it in a way that makes sense for our program? So that kind of begs the question as to whether or not educational technology is a burden, a replacement, or a collaborator. Did you want to expound on this one at all?
Yes. So sometimes when we talk about new technology, and you yourself, or maybe some of your colleagues, when you hear this, oh, here's a new program, you kind of hear a groan, or you may groan in your mind because it's another thing that you have to learn. And here's an additional password that I need. And then sometimes we think about it as a replacement where we may become comfortable with some platform that we're already using, and for various reasons, we find out that our university or our school or program, we're changing to another technology. And so there's something else to learn. But I like to think of it as a collaborator. When we think about it, we can use technology to do things to help us streamline the work that we already do. And
Right.
so using it in that way and thinking of it as a collaborator, it would allow us to dig a little bit deeper and spend more time with students. It can help us investigate more things that we can do to deliver our curriculum in a different way. And and so I think when we think about it that way, we can welcome the idea of bringing technology into our school, our program, and the way that we deliver our curriculum.
Yeah, I love that. Thinking of it as something that comes alongside us and helps us do our jobs better and more effectively, not something that replaces us. I'm sure we've all seen all of the information and the articles on AI. And for some of us, that makes us really nervous. Like, am I going to be replaced in data analytics? But we know that there's that need for that human view of things because our students are humans and the data is going to help us tell a story, but it's not going to be everything. So I really like that thought. So why do we need to streamline? Because faculty, administrators, staff are facing challenges. Time constraints, I mean, the recent studies indicate that faculty spend a majority of their time on their educational, administrative, or clinical activities. Many faculty get into higher ed thinking about that sort of academic publishing, right? The pursuit of knowledge, really doing experimental or subtle based research. And then all of your time is spent on meeting with students or looking at data or in your clinical activities and really in those competing interests that you have in being good stewards of your curriculum and of your field. A limited view of student performance. Access to good data sources can be hard to come by. I think any one of us who has asked for access to the SIS or the LMS has probably encountered this. If you're not teaching in the course and you're doing administrative work and trying to get into some of these data sources can be a challenge and can kind of put you off on your timeline. Confidence in using and interpreting data, the research and the anecdotal evidence. I mean, Yolanda, you talked about that groan about remembering a new password. Talk about the groan of people when you say, we're going to do a new assessment method. We're going to collect some data. We're going to look at some data, right? And it usually comes from a place of either fear or lack of training or just not having the time, right? Back to that time period. So we want to make sure that we have people that's a challenge, that we want to provide confidence and bolster confidence. And then again, time, it has to be repeated. The faculty workload grows every single year. It seems like there's something new. I came from K through 12 education early in my career, and I had a principal who referred to it as the do more blues, and that every year you were in the do more with less blues, right? Because there's going to be another request, but we are still only one person and we have all the energy that we can give. So those are the challenges that we face. And that's why it's great to have those collaborators come alongside us and help us to streamline things. So challenges for assessment leaders. I mean, Yolanda, you know this one the best, right? It's all these multiple platforms. It's spreadsheets, right? Who I just love a spreadsheet, but I don't love 75 of them open at one time, right? And then trying to bounce back and forth and get things together and collated when you have all of these spreadsheets open. And that requires adequate knowledge of spreadsheet programming and adequate knowledge of the data that you're looking at, cleaning data from your different formats. What is this pulling in and returning to you, right? So we can already see how heavy of a lift that is and what is required for you as an assessment leader to have that knowledge to do. Anything you wanted to add with me there, Yolanda?
I just to highlight the time that you take cleaning the data and preparing the data before you can actually use it is a huge challenge. And you
Absolutely.
always have that fear of, what if I mismatch data points? And am
Mm-hmm.
I merging our spreadsheets correctly? And also thinking about, do I need to back up this data, this spreadsheet somewhere else just to make sure, I don't lose it. So there's all these challenges that come into play. And we also have times where faculty may need information from us quickly. And
Right.
we think about how much time it may take for us to turn around a report if we're doing all of these things first before we can actually start working on the report.
Yes. And anybody who's gotten 3/4 into a data analysis and realized they made a mistake somewhere 5 minute, like in the first 5 minutes of analyzing their spreadsheet, has felt the pain of merging data incorrectly or mismatched data points, right? And that's a human thing that is going to happen often. So that time-consuming nature, it's already built in. But if we make mistakes and we're humans, we're error prone, it's going to extend the amount of time between getting the data clean, and being able to do anything with the data. Okay. And so then our attrition estimates, not great, right? This is
Yes,
why we
it
need to look at students at risk, right? This is why we need to be in the data. This is why we need to make sure that our curricular revisions are serving students, that we are designing assessments that are serving students, and that we're intervening early and often, right? I think anecdotally, we can all think of attrition rates in our own schools or in schools that we've worked in, and watching as that has changed across time. Anything else you wanted to add here?
Yeah, just highlight it. We all know that, ACPE looks at our attrition rates. There's been a lot of conversation in the academy right now about this, 4-year attrition rate versus the 1.5 times, and
Yeah.
what really should be counted. And I think during this time where some schools are seeing smaller class sizes, that one student that, gets on a delayed track, or that one student that is dismissed due to academic challenges can really impact our attrition rates. And so if we can look at the data and see what is it that we can do to help those students early on, or
Right.
is there something that our data is showing us that lets us know that we can improve, then I think this is definitely the time for us to really look at that and start putting plans into action.
Yeah. And you highlight a challenge there. And that is, you have those students who are struggling. And so you can't just let them struggle and let them drop out, because that
Mhm.
affects your attrition rate. But at the same time, you can't lower your requirements or the rigor for your program, because we know that at the end, that has real world outcomes for patients, right? Clinically. So we want to make sure that while we are serving students, that we're not lowering our expectations for our students as they progress through the program, that we're supporting them instead of leaving them in the dust, right? And then these are all the things that go into that academic performance, right? We want that on-time graduation. Delayed graduation has an effect there. We are analyzing for that in pharmacy. Dismissal and withdrawals, those are our big measurements of that academic performance, right? Yeah, and we're all targeting a very good on-time graduation rate, so we don't get the nasty grams, as we like to call them, right? We don't get the letters telling us that we're reaching a threshold of graduation rate or dismissal and withdrawal that is becoming problematic for our programs. We want to stay out of the radar, right?
Right. And just to add something, there's always going to be things that we as educators cannot control when it comes
Mhm.
to this slide. But the areas that we really could play a role in would be that on-time graduation, ensuring that our students graduate on time. But even with the delayed graduation, if we do find that it's a result of some academic challenges that that student has. We can play a role in helping address that and perhaps identifying it early enough so that that student doesn't get on the track to delay graduation. So those two areas
Yes.
are definitely areas that we could help address. And then with dismissal too, especially if there's someone who's having those academic challenges, maybe there's something that we can do to prevent that dismissal. And, with withdrawals, some of that we may not be able to control.
Right.
But it's also something to keep in mind if we feel like we could play a role in helping that student perform well academically prior to having to make that decision if they have to withdraw or not.
Yeah. So we know these things are going to happen. It's just we don't want them at the end of the day. We don't want a student withdrawing and saying, I withdrew because I didn't get what I needed from that school. I didn't get support. I didn't, we want them saying, or we want them recognizing that maybe this is too much of a challenge for me right now. Maybe I'm in the wrong field. Maybe I need to take some time or whatever it might be for that student for that withdrawal reason. We don't want to be the impediment, right? To me, that's the worst case scenario when we've created a roadblock for the student to be successful that didn't need to be there in the first place because they've already got enough roadblocks on it coming at them through life in general, right? We don't need to add some extras there for them. So really getting into like that's kind of the foundation of what we're talking about here, and we're really going to get now into this case study. And I'm going to kind of stop talking as much, and I'm going to let Yolanda take it away and really share all of her insights here. So you just let me know when you need me to click forward.
Okay, all right. So just so I will say, as I mentioned earlier, I started in assessment here and then went to academic affairs and continued with the assessment. And one of the things that I would tell my faculty here when they would come to me with questions related to assessment is, what is the data telling you? Like, what story is the data trying to tell you? And so merging that with academic affairs, it's always, what is the data telling me about my student? And what is it that I need to know? What type of signal is the data giving me in regards to that student? And so with that in mind and looking at all of the places where I'm getting data from, it's really important that we're able to look at everything at one time, kind of like on one screen. And so when I look at where we're getting data from our learning management systems. We're getting data if we're using online testing platforms. If we're using audience response systems in our classroom, we're getting data from there. But all of this data is in different platforms, different locations. And the question is, how do we capture all of this in one way so that we can get a true picture about what is going on with the student when it comes to learning and their academic performance? And so when I thought about that, it's like, how do I capture all of this at one place that would prevent me from taking multiple spreadsheets, cleaning everything and trying to merge it? And then the next question came is, how do we manage it? So we think about, okay, every time there's a new exam, am I going to the learning management system, downloading that data, and then uploading it into this spreadsheet that's getting bigger and bigger? And how much time will that take? And then how do I see the larger picture? Now that I have everything in a one spreadsheet, does it just look like a whole bunch of numbers to me? Or do I need to now visualize it in a way that I can now say, oh, okay, I understand. Students are challenged in this course, or this particular student is being challenged in a number of courses. And then the next question is, how much time will it take? Is it going to take weeks to download all the data, clean it, make sure there's no errors in it, and then create some type of visualization so that you can make sense of what the data is telling you? And then lastly, is that data in one central location? For example, if you want to track students from the time that they are admitted or even pre-admissions all the way to graduation, think about all the platforms that you would have to go through in order to get the data from that student from their prerequisite GPA performance all the way through all of their course performances. Is there anything else that are going, if you're doing standardized testing or end of the semester type testing, mile markers, all of that? How can you get it all in one location? And how can it pop up in one location without you doing all of the work? So those are a lot of the questions that I had when I started, and talking to the dean at the time to say, hey, I really want to do this, but I'm only one person. And how can we get everything in one place? And so this is where I began to advocate for having influx at our school, because I felt like it answered all of the questions and all of the challenges that I had. And it spoke with all of the platforms that we were using at that time. Next slide. And so, sorry. And so, the way that we're using it and the benefits that I found with using it, and I'll walk through an example of how we use it here, is that we use the data from Influx for our early alert system here. And so it provides us with a way to provide a timely alert for students to me as the Dean of Academic Affairs, to see who's experiencing academic challenges. And so the positive part about this is that it means that we don't have to wait to the midterm to intervene, because sometimes that's too late for our students. And depending on how many exams or assessments are in a course, they may not be able to recover. It also allows for personalized student advising. So remember, I'm saying to myself, what is the data telling me? And so I can use that to tailor the conversation that I'm having with the student to see, what's really going on? This particular class is challenging to you. And I know this particular class is a lot of application, but you're doing well in classes where it's a lot of memorization. So I can tailor those conversations to the students. And then it's also providing that proactive implementation of resources to aid students in their success. And so I think of it as help early and help often. So when I have these conversations with students, they're not coming to me saying, Dean Hardy, I just don't understand the information. It's usually, Dean Hardy, as Megan said earlier, I don't know where I'm going to eat. So I've been spending all of my time working. Or Dean Hardy,
Yes.
I am taking care of a sick family member. And so I'm not really developing, my study skills the way I should. And then sometimes we've identified some issues that the students didn't even realize that they had, where it's like, I'm doing poorly in classes that require calculations. And then we're
Hmm.
able to say like, okay, have you been evaluated for something like dyscalculia? And
Yes.
so we're able to do that and provide that help and those resources early so that the students can actually implement that and try to incorporate those changes early enough so that they can be successful in that semester as well. Next
I love
slide.
that. And I love that whole student view. That's all I'm going to say
Mhm,
is like, being able to look at the entire student outside of their
mhm,
academics. You've already done the deep dive, so you don't have to ask them what grades they have. You already know what grades they have. So the conversation is more meaningful right off the bat because you're
yes,
not saying, tell me about studying. You're saying, I noticed you have a hard time here. Tell me about that topic. And
mhm.
it just gets you to a different place with your students faster.
It
Oh, and so
does.
there we
And
have your
it's,
face again. Look
yeah.
at
Oh. And I
that.
find that the students actually, it's odd to say, but they enjoy it.
Hmm.
Because it's just like, wow, this isn't you know, the
You're
routine
failing.
templated study
Yeah.
harder.
Right.
And so that's been something that I've seen, and the students have appreciated it so much. And so I'm really happy that we have that opportunity because I'm not spending all the time merging
Yes.
spreadsheets.
And you probably feel less like, many times in that role of assistant and associate dean, you feel like the bad guy. You feel like the stick after they've had so many carrots, right? And
Yes,
they're there
yes.
seeing you because they're in trouble. So if you can get past that and get them to a real conversation, you've broken
Mhm.
a barrier down. And I think that's fantastic. And I'm going to go back.
Definitely, definitely. And so I want to go in a little bit more detail about our early alert program that we do, and give you a little bit of history. So before we had something called the pro mediation program. And basically with that, the first time that a student got a 65 or lower on an exam, they were responsible for filling out the pro-mediation form. And it basically asked them, what did they think was their challenge? What are they going to do differently? How many hours were they working? Were they involved in student activities? All of these things. And then they uploaded the form to our learning management system, and then they met with their advisor. Now, with the pro-mediation program, it was all student initiated, okay? And at the end of the semester, I would get all the pro-mediation forms and then compare how students did for that semester. What we found is that as a challenge, not many of the students completed the forms because there was no feedback. You know, it was that study harder, read your notes before class. It wasn't really tailored. And then because not all of the students were uploading the information, we really didn't get a sense of the benefits. And then lastly, because we weren't getting the documents until the end of the semester, it was too late to help a student. And so that was a challenge with doing everything and really putting the onus on the student. I do believe that students should take accountability and they should be a partner in their learning. But at the same time, with that program, the guidance wasn't really there. And so that was one of the challenges. The one success that we did find with those students who actually submitted the forms, and I was able to go back and track their performance. The performance on the first exam was a great predictor of how they would perform the rest of the semester. However, the issue is that although we knew that, we didn't have really something strong in place to really say, okay, what's going on? Let's figure this out so that you can be successful. The information was located in 2 locations managed by 2 people. So we had the advisor who had a copy of the pro-mediation form, and then we had the administrative support and student affairs who had the form. And so it's going to both to get the form, but again, the students were responsible for uploading the form. And if the student didn't do that, neither person had the forms. There was a delay in meeting with the students in this way because, again, it was a student's responsibility to meet with schedule a meeting with their advisor. And, you know, a pharmacy student may say, hey, I have an exam next week. I need to study for this exam. I'll meet with the advisor later.
And who wants
And
to
as I
tell on
mentioned,
themselves, right?
yeah,
Like who wants to
right.
tattle on themselves? I'm doing bad.
Exactly, right. And again, relying on the students to be proactive in initiating that process. And even with that process, advisors, they weren't able to look at the student across all courses unless the student was submitting those forms with every course. So an advisor may only think that, oh, the student's just performing poorly in one course and that's it. There was no way to see it across the board. And there was no clear way to track follow-up to see, did the student actually implement the suggestions or what they said that they were going to do? Did it work? Do they need to change it, etc.? So those are some of the challenges that we had with our first program, which led to us making some revisions and starting with what we call the PASS program. Now here at PBA, we're like huge fans of acronyms. We have PASS, we have SAS, we have all of these things.
It's a pharmacy thing. Let's
It's
be
a
real. How many acronyms do we
right,
have?
right. And so with PASS, it's a proactive academic student success program. And so what we focused on with this was being able to take the onus off of the student to initiate the process. And with this, we incorporating the ability to review performance across all courses, support a triage in terms of how we would recommend or advise the student, and then put in that follow-up and tracking to see whether or not the students are actually making changes based off of what was recommended to them. Next slide. And so this is how it works. So I review influx every week. So of course, as the academic affairs person, I know when all the exams are. And so I review influx every week to see what the students' performance are in all of their courses. And so this is where the benefit of having all the information in one location, because all of our information from Canvas, where we have all of our grade books for ExamSoft, et cetera, goes, but then it filters right into Influx. So I can look and see the student's performance on any assignment that was in that course. And so if there's a student who has scored a failing score on one exam for the first time, they get to meet with me. And I meet with them, talk to them about what's going on. And I talk to them, say, hey, well, because I have all of their courses performance in front of me, you're doing really well in this course, but this course seems to be a challenge. Why do you think that's happening? What's going on? And really have the opportunity to talk to the student and see where their challenges are. And then from there, I work with the student to create an academic success plan. And this is where we talk about, okay, well, if the issue that is impacting your academic performance is that you're not sure where your next meal is, then part of that triage is going to the Dean of Student Services to see if there's any resources available to help with food insecurity. If the issue is because the student's not really sure how to plan and organize their study time, then their plan will include meeting with our learning specialists so that they can learn about how to properly manage their time and create a study plan calendar. If it really is content for the information, then the plan is to meet with the professor that taught the content. Whereas before, it was just study harder, because we didn't really have the chance to really dig deep and talk to the student that way. And so after that, we have a follow-up portion during the semester to determine their progress. And so this is where a lot of times I'll tell the student, oh, I'll reach out to you just to see how you're doing. But what I found is that the students are coming to me, either sending me an email or just stop by the office and say, oh, I just want I've met with this person. It's been going great. Or, hey, did you see my grade? I passed the following exam. So it's really good to have those victories. And so we get to document that, so we can say, this was what was recommended, and this was the outcome with that. At the midpoint, what we do is I do another scoping review of the student performance in all of their courses. And if I see that students are failing one or more courses, or if they're failing one course and they're consistently failing exams in that course, then I notify our student affairs committee to say, here's a student who is not performing well across courses or consistently. I've met with the student before, they're still having some challenges. And at that point, the student will meet with me and the student affairs committee. And so that's where we dig even deeper, what's been going on? Is there something that we're missing? What worked in your academic success plan? What seems to not be working as well as you wanted it to? How can we change it? And then depending on where the student is, that's also a time where there's a conversation of, okay, this is what can happen if you're not successful this semester, just so that the student is aware. Not as a way to scare the student, but just to say, these are your options. This is the plan that could occur moving forward. And then all of this is documented, which is another good thing because the documentation is in a central location. I kind of think of it as a patient chart and soap notes, where you can go back and look at that previous visit to see what transpired. We have that opportunity with this. Next slide.
Yeah, this is really fantastic. I just want to say it's awesome. And I'm sure some faculty that are listening are like, wait a second, the ADAA is meeting with students. And like you're taking a burden that we didn't mention at the top was the understanding of all the interventions that are available for students when they need different targeted interventions. And we talk about training and analyzing data. Think about the training required to know how to serve a student who's telling you they don't have anywhere to sleep regularly, they don't have money, they don't have food, they're in a relationship that's dangerous, right? So like all of those extra side things, you're providing your faculty with just regular training too, which is really fantastic.
Yeah, and that was one of the things when we started with the past program, talking to the faculty, because they're like, well, we don't know what to do if a student comes and says, hey, I'm in a living situation that's not safe. They're like, well, we don't really know what to do except for, empathize, but we don't know what the resources are. And so this type of format that we have, where kind of like I'm that first person and I can triage the people, it helps lift the burden off the faculty member to say, I don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
it helps them to be able to say, okay, student is coming because they have questions about the material. I can spend that time talking to them about the material. And it's been fun. I mean, it sounds weird
Yeah.
to say that, but to be able to really see, our students, where there are certain times where they may feel they don't want to share certain information, and for them to be able to say, this is what's going on and this is affecting, my academic success, then it's like,
Right.
okay, let's figure this out. And I tell them, like, my office is Vegas, so you
I
know,
love that. What happens here? That's
yeah, what happens here stays
fantastic.
here, unless it's going to
Yeah.
cause you harm, then I have to report
Yeah.
it. But
Then I have to do
um,
the right thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's like, okay, let's talk about this, and if this is an issue, we can figure this out,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
will, we'll keep looking at how this is impacting your academic success along the way.
That's fantastic. Well, at this point, we're going to let you take over and drive. And as you're bringing up the screen, there was a really good question in the Q&A kind of just related to functionally, how do you limit course coordinators from like post-assessment item analysis so that you're sure that when you are looking at your data, that you're looking at the final version of an exam after any modifications have been necessary? Do you have
Yes,
like a
that's
process for that?
yes. So, actually, let me not share right now for an answer. Um, so, this faculty have been really good with, they shoot me emails all the time where they're like, hey, I've, I haven't released my scores yet because of this. I've made this error and I need to fix it. Or before you reach out to students about my exam, just know I'm doing this. And so they've been really
Fantastic.
responsive with that. And the faculty have been really good with quick turnaround with grading and posting. And so usually it's like a week for influx to refresh. And so they make sure that they have all their errors or things like that corrected within that week. And then
Yeah.
if they don't, then they let me know, like, hey, heads up, before you reach out to any students in my class, just know that I'm doing this evaluation.
Yeah.
And so that's been very helpful.
Fantastic. And just as an exciting thing for those of you, we're actually moving to daily ingestions now. So you can get that real-time data. So if your faculty say to you, Yolanda, I need one more day, and you can meet with them tomorrow or 2 days from now, you don't have to wait the extra week. You can see it a lot faster these days.
Okay,
So we're super
excellent.
happy to start providing regular daily ingestions to our customers.
Awesome. Awesome. So I want to walk through a little bit like what I do as a part of our past program. And so I have a demo Canvas site because I, of course, can't show real student data. But what this looks like is I have my exams. I know when the exams have been posted. And the first thing I do is go to the Canvas student advising sheet. So I click on that, and I'm looking for a couple of things. So I'm going to go through this first as if I'm looking at one particular exam. So what I do, we're going to pretend like this is 2021, but I'm actually going to pull the spring 2019 data sheet. Okay, and let's say that the course in particular that I'm looking for is this Pharmacy 601. So I pull those two things up. And so with our past program, the cutoff that would say if you score below this score, you'll be enrolled, we call it enrolled in the PASS program, is 65%. So I'll set the desired average to 65%. And the nice thing with influx is that it gives you this breakdown here at who's at risk, who's vulnerable, who's not at risk. Whereas in my spreadsheets, it was, you'd have to do the formatting to say if this cell is less than whatever, make it turn red. This is done for you, the conditional formatting.
And
And so it's like,
heavens forbid
okay,
you change a cell, right?
yeah,
Add a column.
yeah. And so when I look at this, I'm like, okay, this student here scored below that 64%. Here's a student who's vulnerable because even though they didn't meet that cutoff, that's someone that I'm going to keep an eye on because, that student could go either way right now. And so I would definitely want to keep an eye on that student. But the student that would get the email from me asking them to schedule to meet with me would be this particular student. And so I would meet with that student and talk about how their performance is. I don't think there's any assignments. No assignments in here. Let's see. There you go. Let's see if there are any assignments. Okay, so I would look to see what assignments were in that particular course outside of any exams. Okay, and I'll see that she had some quizzes, she had the exam, it has participation. And so looking at this, where this little black line designates the class average, I'm looking at her performance. It's like, okay, she didn't do quite well on the quiz. Her participation kind of leaves much to be desired. I mean, it's not bad, but it could improve. And so I would talk to her about this, so what's been going on in the class? I see your quizzes scores, didn't do very well. Tell me about that. And just kind of talk through it to see were there any challenges that she's encountered. Ask her a little bit about the class participation. And maybe I find out that she's typically shy, and so she's a little bit afraid to speak up in class. And so we would talk about some strategies, and I'd let her know, hey, if you have a question, there's definitely someone else in the class that has that same question, and kind of talk about strategies to help her. With some of our students where English may be a second language and they're concerned about that, I can refer them to offices on campus that help with students where English is their second language so they can grow confident in those areas. So we talk to them, figure out what the issues are, and do that triage. Is it truly, the content that's the issue? Is it time management that's the issue? Is there just, I'm afraid to speak up? Is that the issue? And we'll create that plan. Okay, well, I know I know you don't like speaking up in class. For the next class, what challenge could you give yourself, to, if it's not answering a question, maybe you want to ask a question. And then how did you do? If the content is not something that you're comfortable with, meet with the professor. And then I tell them, read the material first. And when you go to the professor, say, this is what I've read, this is what I understand, this is where I have questions, so that
Yes.
it's beneficial.
Yeah.
If the student's not coming to class, why aren't you coming to class? What can we do to ensure that you're getting to class? So I would go through those types of things and help write that action plan. And then we document it. Now, let's say then that it is, we'll go back to the grade book and let's
Yolanda,
say
I'm
that
laughing
it's,
while you're navigating there. I'm laughing at the student not coming to class because we tend to think like when they're at the
yes,
graduate level that they want to be there and they're motivated to come to class. But I've been there. I've had the advisee who just didn't want to get up for the 8 a.m. class. And,
yeah,
at first the thought was, like you've said with these deep dives, at first the thought was, hey, you just don't want to get up. You just don't want to get up. Well, then come to find out there were all sorts of other things going on in the
yeah,
student's life. And like,
yeah.
if we hadn't had those conversations and we just chalked it up to the student just doesn't want to get out of bed,
Yeah,
that student would probably still be struggling.
exactly. And it's eye-opening to see what some of the challenges are. I mean, I've run the gamut. I mean, previous institutions, why aren't you coming to class? I keep forgetting to set my alarm clock. Okay, let's work on that, versus I have to drop my kids off in the morning to go to, for them to go to school before I can come, so there's all these different things that you find out, that can be a little bit more helpful for the student than, study your notes before class. That is helpful, but it may not be what the student, really would find beneficial for this situation. So then if we fast forward to that midpoint, so looking at the student again, I see, okay, you're under our target for just about all of your classes, except for one, and then you're vulnerable in another class. So this is a time where between the first course failure and midpoint, the student would have had many interactions with me at some point. Not because it's required, but it's because I'm checking in. How are things going? How have you been doing on your plan? If your action plan isn't working out the way you want it to, is it time to look at revising it? So those interactions will happen. And those are those have been student led, which was not what we intended. But the student usually comes and says, okay, here's my exam, didn't do well. This is what I'm changing. And so it's really nice to see the student taking that initiative. But in this case, this student would be referred to our student affairs. So myself and our student affairs team would meet with the student and have a deeper dive with the student about what's going on. Have you implemented some of the changes before? Let's see your action plan. What else is there that we need to do to help you? And then at this point, this is, okay, let's talk about what will happen moving forward. If your grades are not able to come up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we have that conversation with the student at that time. And then again, we can document all of that information. And the thing that's nice about that is that for our students, as they continue through the program, we have this continuous documentation of how they've been doing and how they've been improved. And then if we see a little dip, later on in their academic career, it's like, okay, wait a minute, you're having some challenges, you started to do better. What happened? Because now you're starting to, not do well anymore. And in that case, we had a situation, with a student who went from taking not the full load to going back to taking a full load. And it's just like, wow, like I'm going to full load now and I need to figure out how to manage all of this. And so again, that triage came into play where it's like, okay, well, let's set you up with a learning specialist to help you create a schedule. It wasn't, I don't understand the content. It was just like, I have all my classes now and I need to figure this out. And so being able to help in that situation, was very beneficial. So that's how I use this part, of influx to, help the students and to really identify what's going on, triage them and move forward. And the fact that I'm not merging spreadsheets and doing conditional formatting and all of these things,
Yeah.
makes me able to have the time to meet with the students within a week of them having their exams, scores posted. So whatever changes are being made, they can be made, early enough so that the impact can be seen on that following exam.
Yeah, and you're probably demystifying some of these interventions for students, right? I'm going
Mhm.
to set you up with a learning specialist. It's just because you need that extra help transitioning from halftime load to full load. We don't want to put you back in that first year of pharmacy school experience where you're not sure what's up and what's down, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
demystifying those processes and saying to students, it's just support. It's nothing about you as a person. It's just
Mhm.
what you need right now. So
Yes.
that's probably a benefit that isn't even thought about, but is happening all of the time.
Yes, definitely. And, because I tell the students, it's like, I'm like, you got in a pharmacy school, right? So like, don't forget that you are a smart person, you made it
Right.
here. And it's
Yes.
just like, these are things, this is not saying that something is wrong with you. This is not saying that you're not supposed to be here. We want to help you, and it's just like, that's what all these resources are here for. It's not for you to feel bad or anything. And the students appreciate that, and it's funny, we've had situations where before I can even go to Influx to see the scores, students knock on my door. I just want to tell you, I'm in the PASS program now, so I'm going to email you so I can meet with you. And
Yep.
that's great because it's not, oh, I'm going to be sent to the principal's office, or I don't want the email from Dean Hardy. It's, oh no, like, she's here to help. I'm going to go see her. And I think being able to focus your time on that, this is where the collaboration comes into play,
Yes.
where all the data gathering is being done so that I can have that time to meet with the students. And that's where the collaboration help with using systems like this, so that you can spend the time working with the students and meeting with the students as well.
Which is why we all did this anyway, right? Like that's
Yeah.
why we all got into education to begin with, was for none of us did it because we wanted to look at spreadsheets.
Right.
I hope not.
Oh, I love a good spreadsheet, but
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We wanted to be with kids, with students. Yeah. Yeah.
right. So the benefits, I mean, I've gone through them a lot. The feedback is fast, even faster now,
Yep.
that we've heard. And so you can meet with the students quickly. You don't have to worry about merging data. And you have more time to meet with those students and develop those relationships. And just encourage them. I read an article about students who went through COVID. A lot of them they lack the confidence because of, what it's like going to school online, et cetera, et cetera. And so being able to meet with them and encourage them and help them build their confidence is it's just rewarding.
Yeah, there's so many, post-pandemic, I'm sure we're all sick of hearing that word,
Mhm.
outcomes that have affected our students. The data shows,
Yes.
like you said, they're lacking confidence, lacking in some of that grit that we know is so important for being a successful adult, but they're also lacking height, the data has shown that students in grade 7 and 9 have lost about 3 years worth of math and reading ability
Mhm.
because of the drawdowns that we necessarily had to do. So we're fighting an uphill battle for sure in higher
Mhm.
ed these days and in all forms of education, where we really need to take that buzz phrase of meeting students where they are and make it
Mhm.
happen for real. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right.
And I listed here
Awesome.
just some other examples of how you can use this data from Influx to help you drill down and really talk to students. If you're using a online testing system that populates with Influx, you can look at student performance based on the format of the question. Are they doing better on multiple choice versus short answer versus
Yep.
essay? If you're categorizing questions based on Bloom's taxonomy, do they do well on the lower levels, but they start to have trouble when it comes to analyzing? And how will that impact how you would advise them? And then looking at that student performance across courses based on curricular or programmatic outcomes, if those are things you're tagging. So if one of your programmatic outcomes is about communication and you notice all the courses that have a communication element in them, that student is performing poorly on it, that can tailor how you provide help and resources to that student compared to if it was calculations or something like that.
Yes, absolutely. And some of these things can help us at that individual level. And then on that aggregate level, when we're thinking
Mhm.
about the other side of your job, right, which is really reviewing that curriculum and making sure that the curriculum is working as intended. And so if we're like looking at Bloom's taxonomy, and what if we're finding that we're not even getting to the level of analysis that we expect by the P3 year, we know that
Mhm.
as faculty, as a curriculum, we need to up our game so that our students can be high performers as well. So it's
Exactly.
that effort of making sure we're helping the students individually, but also that in the aggregate, we're providing them with the opportunities to be successful as they move throughout. This has all been about what you have been able to show us and share with us, these best practices. When we collaborate across schools, I think we're stronger as a profession. And I cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.